Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Curtis. Welcome to this video and thanks for joining me. Today we're talking about time signatures, specifically how you can tackle and how you can play any time signature you are likely to come across as a musician. As a drummer, I'm going to use the drums to demonstrate, but this should work, this should apply to any instrument, any form of music, any style of music. So whether you're a piano player, a guitarist, a flautist, a saxophonist, it doesn't matter because time signature, rhythmic theory, it's all the same. So even though I'm going to apply today's work on the drums, you can apply it to your own instrument and it will work just as well. The first thing to note is that time signatures don't require any extra skill on your instrument than what you already possess. What I mean is, if you are already comfortable playing at a certain level in 4/4, the common time signature, you don't need to relearn or learn extra skills of playing to play in 5/4 or 7/8 or 12/8 or whatever time signature it may be. You don't need to improve your skills at playing just to play in a different time signature. What you do need to improve, if you struggle with those time signatures, is your understanding of what that time signature means and how you tackle it. Once you have a thorough understanding of the time signature, it's just a case of transferring the skills you've already got to the new time signature. So I'm going to break this video down into 3 sections, each corresponding to the 3 types of time signature that exist. Before we do that, it is important to understand the basic anatomy of a time signature so that we are all on the same page. Now, a few years ago, I did a video on this topic, links in the description, which breaks this down in a little bit more detail, so feel free to check that out. The basic mechanism of a time signature is to tell you how music is divided. Music without time signatures, music without bars would be like a book without full stops, without commas, without paragraphs, without sentences. It would just be gibberish because all of those words would blend together. We wouldn't know where one sentence starts and one sentence finishes. It's the same with music, and we use time signatures to divide that music into bars that make the most sense. If you have a melody, if you have a rhythm, it has a natural length, and a time signature tells you what that length is. A time signature, as you all know, contains 2 numbers, a top number and a bottom number, and these tell us everything we need to know about the rhythm and the length of the bars. The bottom number corresponds to a note value. So we all know quarter notes, we all know eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes, half notes, whole notes, or if you're British, crotchets, quavers, semiquavers, semibreves, minims. Each of these corresponds to a fraction. If we use the American terminology, quarter note, it's easy, it's a quarter, so the bottom number is a 4. If we use eighth notes, the bottom number is an 8. If we use 16th notes, the bottom number is a 16. The bottom number of that time signature corresponds to one of those note values. So when you see a time signature, you will get an idea straight away of which note values you're going to be working with. If a time signature is 4/4, that's a 4 on the bottom, that tells us we're dealing with quarter notes. If a time signature is 7/8, that's an 8 on the bottom, that tells us we're dealing with eighth notes. The top number is much more simple, that just tells us how many are in each bar. So sticking with 7/8, we know we're dealing with eighth notes, the 7 tells us there are 7 of them in each bar. If the time signature is 5/8, we know we're dealing with eighth notes again, this time there are only 5 of them each bar. If it's 3/4, we know we're dealing with quarter notes and there are 3 of them each bar. That's the basic anatomy of a time signature. And that's all well and good, but that doesn't necessarily help us playing them. If we see 19/16, we may know that tells us there are 19/16th notes in a bar. That doesn't necessarily help us actually play 19/16. Binary time signatures. This is the simplest and most common form of time signature. Binary refers to anything containing groups of 2. In this instance, binary time signatures refer exclusively and always to quarter notes. Any time signature with a number 4 as the bottom number is binary. Any time signature with the number 4 as a bottom note works with quarter notes, is all around quarter notes. So if we know that the bottom number is always going to be a 4 in this instance, all we really need to pay attention to is the top number. So let's take an example. Let's use 5/4. As our example. This is a binary time signature, meaning we're dealing with quarter notes and their base subdivisions. Quarter notes are divided into eighth notes, 16th notes, and 32nd notes. If we want to use any other subdivision like triplets, quintuplets, septuplets, sextuplets, we need to use a tuplet, which is the equivalent of using an accidental, a sharp or a flat, in a key signature. We'll come to those later. For now, if we're dealing with 5/4, we know we're dealing with quarter notes, and we know there are 5 of them in a bar. Well, if you understand quarter notes, you already know how to count quarter notes. We can count the notes themselves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or we can count the 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and, or we can count the 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 5E and a. That doesn't make any difference because they're all the same value, that's all the same length. So as long as you understand how to count quarter notes, you're already halfway there. So, in terms of playing this on the drums, what we first want to do is give ourselves a pulse. And we are going to do that by dividing those quarter notes between the bass drum and the snare drum. Because the time signature is 5/4, we have 5 of them to go around. So let's go bass, snare, snare. They are our 5 quarter notes divided between the bass drum and the snare drum. That gives us our basic pulse. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, boom, ba, boom, ba, ba. To turn that into a drum beat, all I need to do is add the hi-hat over the top, playing the constant 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and. And we've got something resembling a very simple drum beat. In order to make this more interesting, we can do exactly the same as we would do in 4/4. We can start adding bass drums, we can start adding ghost notes, we can start displacing the beat, but that is this time based around a 5-beat pulse, where previously we might be using a 4-beat pulse. This time, we just need to remember to add that extra 5th beat at the end. Now this goes back to what I was talking about at the start. I didn't have to relearn all of that in 5/4. If I've already got that in 4/4, it's just a counting game. I just need to remember to count to 5 instead of counting to 4. And you all did this when you were first starting out. Whatever your instrument, you started counting 8th notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You started counting 16th notes, 1E and a 2E and a. Well, this time, instead of going back to 1 after 4E and a, go back to 1 after 5E and a instead. We're just adding an extra beat of the bar. Now, a few points to note so far. First of all, that pulse is important because that pulse, that boom, ba, boom, ba, ba, boom, ba, boom, ba, ba, that is the sole reason that we are playing in 5/4 at all. Now remember this, the time signature serves you, not the other way around. It shouldn't be the case that you are playing in a time signature just for the sake of it. It should be the case that what you are trying to play happens to be this long. It should be the case that you are playing 5/4 because you are wanting to play a rhythm that happens to be 5 beats long. And this is where the pulse comes from. That pulse is just a simple 5-beat pulse, but it could be a lot more complicated or it could be a lot more simple. It really doesn't matter. What matters is that you are playing in your time signature because what you are trying to play happens to be that long. And it is the pulse of the rhythm or the pulse of the melody that dictates that. So take Sting's 7 Days, which is a famous example of the verse being in 5/8. Boom, bat, boom, dat. We've got this drum beat. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5. That exists solely because the guitar pattern that Sting wrote happens to be 5/8 notes long. It wasn't the other way around, the music came first. Anyway, binary time signatures are by far the most simple and by far the easiest to play because we're always dealing with quarter notes. That means we're always dealing with 8th notes and 16th notes. So if you are already confident in subdividing 8th notes and 16th notes, you're already doing it. You just need to remember to go one more to that 5th beat of the bar. As another example, let's go the other way. Let's drop down to 3/4. We now know what this means. We're dealing with quarter notes. and there are 3 of them in every bar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. And I'm treating that the same way I would treat a groove in 4/4. I'm just only counting to 3 instead. I don't need to change anything else about my playing. I'm just thinking slightly shorter. Just the same as if you play an A minor instead of C major, you don't need to change the whole way you play. You just need to root to an A instead of a C. All the notes are the same. Okay, let's move on. The second time signature type we are going to consider are ternary time signatures. Ternary meaning groups of 3. Now, this is where things get interesting because ternary time signatures always contain an 8 on the bottom, but not all time signatures with an 8 on the bottom are ternary. That's a bit of a mouthful. Basically, what you need to look at is the top number. If the top number is a prime number, 5, 7, 11, 17, you are not dealing with a ternary time signature. If the top number is not a prime number, 6, 9, 12, 15, you are dealing with a ternary time signature. Just like binary time signatures with a 4 on the bottom, ternary time signatures contain quarter notes. Only this time, those quarter notes are dotted. So let's take another common time signature, 6, 8. The bottom number is an 8, telling us we are dealing with 8th notes. The top number tells us we are dealing with 6 of them. There are 6 8th notes in our bar. How do we get those 6 8th notes? We get them from having 2 dotted quarter notes. This is where it starts to get a bit confusing if you let it, because we're kind of saying there are 2 beats to the bar, but we're also saying there's 6 to the bar. So think of the time signature as telling you how many of a certain note are in each bar, and use your knowledge of binary or ternary, quarter notes or dotted quarter notes, to find the beat. So we've got 6 8th notes, divide that by 2 groups of 3, we have 2 dotted quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our 6/8 meter is a duple meter. It contains 2 primary beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like we did with 5/4, let's split those 2 beats between the bass drum and the snare drum first to give us our pulse. Now I'm just going to add the hi-hat, again playing the 8th notes, only this time, because we're working with dotted quarter notes, there are going to be 3 8th notes per beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Our ternary time signature still contains quarter notes. The only difference is this time those quarter notes are dotted, meaning we deal with ternary subdivisions. 3 8th notes, 6 16th notes, right? So here's the first question then. Here's the first part where it's possible to become genuinely confused. Why have 6/8 if it's 2 beats to the bar when you could just have 2/4 if that's also 2 beats to the bar? Well, as we said, 1 deals with quarter notes, 1 deals with dotted quarter notes. This is the difference in rhythmic theory between straight and swung music. Let's hear 2/4, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Nice and straight. All those 8th notes are evenly spaced and there are 2 of them per beat. This time, 6/8, we've still got 2 beats to the bar. Because they're now dotted quarter notes, there are 3 8th notes to the beat. This gives us our swing sensation. Now we start coming to an interesting concept then. Every binary time signature, 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, remember everything with a 4 on the bottom, has a corresponding ternary time signature where those quarter notes become dotted quarter notes. So let's take 4/4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, that's our binary time signature with 4 quarter notes in the bar. If we make each of those quarter notes dotted, well, we have 4 dotted quarter notes in the bar. Each of those now have 3 quarter notes, 3, 6, 9, 12. That gives us the corresponding ternary time signature of 12/8. So 4/4 and 12/8 both have the same amount of beats in the bar, 4, only 4/4 divides each of those beats into 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 8 eighth notes, whereas 12/8 divides each of those beats into 3 quavers, 3 eighth notes per quarter note, giving us 12/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Both of them have 4 beats to the bar, but because one is binary, we get the straight rhythm with only 2 eighth notes per beat. One of them is ternary with the dotted quarter notes. They have 3 eighth notes per beat. Do we want swing? Do we want straight? Now here's the second question. What's the difference between 6/8 and 12/8? It's the same as what's the difference between 2/4 and 4/4. Where do you want to divide your beat? If you've got 2 beats to the bar or you've got 4 beats to the bar, really look at when the chord changes. What's the bass player playing? What's the piano player playing when they change chord? Rhythmically, there's no difference. 2 beats to the bar, 4 beats to the bar is just twice as many. So there is no difference. What you're looking at is where does the music change? Where's the phrase length? Is your phrase 2 beats long or is your phrase 4 beats long? So in terms of how to play a ternary signature then, you're still thinking in terms of quarter notes. Let's take a slightly less common ternary time signature, 9/8. We know it's ternary because 9 is not a prime number. As we said, it is only a ternary time signature if the bottom number is 8 and the top number is not prime. 9/8 is not prime, so we know it's a ternary time signature. This means we are dealing with dotted quarter notes. How many? Well, what's 9 divided by 3? 3. We are dealing with 3 dotted quarter notes, 3 beats to the bar, each beat of the bar containing 3 eighth notes. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. Remember, ternary, groups of 3, it's going to be a swinging groove as a basic kind of rhythmic structure. So, our simple 9/8, how do we play this? We play it like we played 5/4. We take those quarter notes and we divide them between the bass and the snare drum to create a pulse, and then we add the eighth notes, remembering this time that there are 3 eighth notes per beat. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. Again, in terms of ability, in terms of skill, that's just the same as playing 12/8. That's just the same as playing 6/8, only I'm counting to a different number. That's it. All the vocabulary still applies. All of my ability still applies. Okay, now we move on to the time signatures that are slightly more complicated, what I've called compound time signatures. Now, just as a disclaimer, the word compound is thrown around a lot with regard to time signatures. Some people mean one thing, other people mean another thing when they say compound time signatures. So when I talk about compound time signatures in this video, I'm talking very specifically about one concept which I'm about to talk about. If you have encountered the word compound in another sense, that's okay. I'm not contradicting that. I'm just borrowing that word. In today's video, for today's explanation, compound time signatures refer to time signatures which contain both quarter notes and dotted quarter notes. Remember when we talked about time signatures where the top number is a prime number? These are our compound time signatures because we need to build them using both quarter notes and dotted quarter notes. Let's start with the most simple compound time signature, 5/8. Going back to the start, we know from the anatomy of a time signature, we are dealing with eighth notes because the bottom number is 8, and we know we have 5 of them to play with because the top number is 5. There are 5 eighth notes per bar. We find our pulse by combining one dotted quarter note, which is 3 eighth notes, with one quarter note. which is 2/8 notes. We then have two options of which we put first. Do we want the dotted quarter note first, in which case we get a 3/2, or do we want the quarter note first, in which case we get a 2/3. The only difference is we are switching between quarter notes and dotted quarter notes. The main reason we count them in eighth notes is because that gives us the tempo. So, to feel our pulse, in this instance we will use dotted quarter notes first. So dotted quarter note followed by quarter note. We want 3 quavers followed by 2 quavers, but we want all of those eighth notes to be the same speed. So first of all, we're going to find those 5 eighth notes and we're just going to play 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to play a bass drum for the dotted quarter note, and then 3 eighth notes later, I'm going to play a snare drum for the quarter note. So that's 3 on the bass drum, 2 on the snare drum. One, two, three, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That gives us our pulse. That's the reason we would play in 5/8. The fact that we've put the dotted quarter note first and the quarter note second gives us that particular pulse. If we were to invert it, so the quarter note comes first, we would have 2 eighth notes on the bass drum, 3 eighth notes on the snare drum. All I have to remember is which way round I've done it. Have I got the quarter note first or have I got the dotted quarter note first? Let's look at a slightly more complicated time signature then, 7/8. It's a prime number, so we know it can't be ternary. It's got an 8 on the bottom, so we know it can't be binary. Therefore, it has to be compound. We're working with eighth notes and we've got 7 of them to play with. So what combination of quarter notes and dotted quarter notes, 2s and 3s, do we have to use to create 7? Well, we need 2 quarter notes, that gives us 4, and we need 1 dotted quarter note, 5, 6, 7. So we've built the pulse of our 7/8 by combining quarter notes and dotted quarter notes. The order you put them in is up to you, is up to the music you're trying to play. So to find our pulse, I'm going to play 7 eighth notes on the hi-hat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm then going to divide dotted quarter notes and quarter notes amongst the bass drum and the snare drum to find our pulse. For the sake of demonstration, I'll put the dotted quarter note first, followed by 2 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. Etc. That gives us our pulse, right? We've now got a very definite rhythm that the rest of the band or your audience can latch onto, and that is the reason you are playing in 7/8 at all. This applies to any time signature in existence, whether it's binary, ternary, or compound. You look at the top number and you decide, how do I get to that number using quarter notes and dotted quarter notes? Because those quarter notes and dotted quarter notes provide your pulse, right? Let's take one more example. Let's take 11/8. We know we're dealing with eighth notes because the bottom number is 8. We know we're dealing with a compound time signature, combinations of quarter notes and dotted quarter notes, because the top number is prime. 11 is prime, so it can't be ternary. We need to create 11. We need to find 11 eighth notes using combinations of quarter notes and dotted quarter notes. So if we did 3, 6, 9, 3 dotted quarter notes would give us 9 eighth notes, followed by 1 standard quarter note, 10, 11, because that standard quarter note makes up the remaining 2. For the sake of demonstration, I'll put the 3 dotted quarter notes first, followed by 1 quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That gives us a basic 11. That gives us a rhythm, that gives us a pulse, which we can then go on to decorate with whatever tricks and vocabulary we choose. So there's a lot to take in here, and there's a few kind of big ideas that I'm pushing that may be controversial to some. Here's my first big suggestion. Every rhythm on earth can be made up of threes and twos, either all twos, all threes, or a combination of both. That means any rhythm on earth can be divided or made up from quarter notes, dotted quarter notes, or combinations of the two. And that's exactly what I've just talked about. Any time signature with a 4 on the bottom is made up by combining quarter notes. You just need to know how many of them. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a. When we are dealing with an 8 on the bottom, we need to just take a quick look at the top number to see if it's prime. If it's not, for example, a 6, we know we are dealing with ternary time signatures. We know we are dealing with dotted quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 2 of those dotted quarter notes, and each of them contain 3 eighth notes, giving us our swing 2-beat pulse. So, question you may be asking, you may be shouting at the screen now then, how come all this jazz I play is in 4/4? If we've just said time signatures with a 4 on the bottom are to do with eighth notes and quarter notes and 16th notes, where do these triplets come from? Well, there's 2 answers here. Firstly, we can indeed use triplets, and we can just write a 3 above everything else. So when you take your 4/4, you've got 4 quarter notes to the bar, you're dividing them into eighth notes, and then you're using a tuplet, which as I said, is like an accidental, which raises or lowers a pitch, and we are converting those eighth notes by squeezing in a third one to create a triplet. The problem with this, the problem with writing swing music with triplets everywhere, is you just get a mess on the score. It's not practical to just use tuplets all the time. Just like you wouldn't write the key of A flat major in A minor and then just use accidentals all the time. You would use the key of A flat major in the key signature so you don't have to use accidentals during the piece. Same way, why use triplets everywhere when we can just use a time signature that's already based in groups of 3? So remember what I was saying about every time signature having its relevant ternary time signature. 4/4 becomes 12/8. Those 4 quarter notes become 4 dotted quarter notes. Well, that makes sense in that all jazz is now in 12/8 because we're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We're just playing certain notes on that 12/8 note pattern. But most jazz is not in 12/8. Why is most jazz in 4/4? Why is a lot of blues written in 4/4? Well, here's the controversial part. Technically, it's wrong. Technically, if you see jazz in 4/4 without triplets everywhere, it is taking certain liberties. We've all seen that little swing symbol at the top, which tells us those eighth notes are to be treated as either side of a triplet. Well, that's why. It is far easier to write in 4/4. It is far easier to read in 4/4 and then mentally apply that swing pattern to it than it is to either write triplets on everything or read it in 12/8. It is simple practicality, right? But from textbook rhythmic theory, jazz in 4/4 is incorrect because 4/4 is a straight binary time signature. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. To get that swing, we would either need to cram triplets everywhere or we need to think of it as 12/8. But, as I said, 4/4 is far more practical for everyday purposes, which is why we have that little swing symbol, that modulation symbol in the corner, which tells us to treat every eighth note as being either side of a triplet. Okay, let's tackle one of the more complicated time signatures then. Let's have a look at 1916. This is perhaps one of the more famous time signatures with 16 on the bottom, thanks to Frank Zappa's Keep It Greasy from Joe's Garage. As drummers, we've all tried to emulate Vinnie Colaiuta and we've all failed. Why is this 1916? Why does it exist? Well, first of all, we have to look at the top number, 19. It's a prime number. We can't go any smaller. We can't divide it into smaller bars. So that's why it's 19. But why is it 16? Why can't it be 8? Why can't it be 4? Well, remember what we've been saying so far. Whatever the top number is, we have to use multiples of 3 and multiples of 2, dotted quarter notes and quarter notes, to make up the required amount. So in the case of 19/8, we would just use quarter notes and dotted quarter notes until we reached 19 eighth notes. The problem is we're in 1916. That means we need to create 19 16th notes. And there's the issue. How do we do that? Well, let's start with 4 quarter notes and see what happens. One quarter note contains 4 16th notes. So if we've got 4 quarter notes, we've got 4, 8, 12, 16 16th notes. So by having 4 quarter notes in the bar, we're 3 short. Let's take an 8th note. That has 2 16th notes. A dotted 8th note has 3 16th notes. That's what we need. So we've got 4 quarter notes and 1 dotted 8th note. In other words, we've got 4 quarter notes with 3 16th notes stuck on the end. And this gives us the rhythmic pulse. Remember that time signature is there to serve us. There is an underlying rhythmic pulse that we are trying to find. So if we've got 4 quarter notes followed by 3 16th notes, we get our pulse. 1 E under, 2 E under, 3 E under, 4 E under, 5 E and 1 E under, 2 E under, 3 E under, 4 E under, 5 E and boomt, gat, boomt, gat, gat da boomt, gat, boomt, gat, gat da boom. And there is a simple pulse for 1916. It is not as complicated as it sounds. Now the problem is Vinnie Colaiuta and Frank Zappa didn't do that. Their pulse was much more complicated, but nevertheless equated to 4 quarter notes and 1 dotted 8th note. 16 16th notes with 3 more stuck on the end. So I think that's plenty for one video. If you've made it this far, congratulations. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope there has been something here that has helped you out. If so, please let me know, because I really like to hear that these videos are helping some of you. And as I've said, if you've got this far, congratulations. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please consider heading across to my Patreon page and becoming a subscriber, because that really helps me to keep making these videos. It helps me make them more often, and it helps me dedicate more time to making them of a higher quality. If you've enjoyed it, that's a great way to support this channel. Thanks a lot, and I hope to see you soon.